Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World's Panorama, the show that gives you a 360-degree view of major global news. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get to detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Hugo Chavez wins another 6-year term as Venezuela president. World Panorama takes a look at what his re-election could mean for Asia. Syria-Turkey tensions high after Ankara intercepts a passenger plane. Turkey accuses Russia of supplying Syria with arms. Sparks fly as Joe Biden, Paul Ryan face off in Trieste vice presidential debate. Biden and Ryan skirmish over Libya attack. And your SADA report says Lance Armstrong's team ran most sophisticated doping program ever. Armstrong may now face perjury charges. And straight to the story in focus this week. Venezuela's free, fair and peaceful presidential election, won again by Hugo Chavez, has restored the confidence of the world in Latin American democracy after the constitutional overthrow of President Fernando Lugo of Paraguay in June this year, and also the unconstitutional removal of Honduran President Manuel Zelaya in 2009. Well, the immediate and graceful acceptance of the people's verdict by Enrique Capriles, the loser, and his message of congratulations to Chavez augur well for the future of the Venezuelan democracy. But how does Chavez's latest term in office impact Asia in the days to come, given the oil resources that it has? That's what we'll be talking about in this edition. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome Shobhan Saxena. He is a senior editor with the Sunday Times. Thanks, sir, so much for joining us. Well, before we come to him for his perspective, have a look at this detailed report.
Venezuela's socialist president Hugo Chavez won re-election, cementing his position as a dominant figure in modern Latin American history. Chavez's remarkable presidential election victory on October 7th, in which he won 55% of the vote on an 81% turnout after 14 years in power, has a significance far beyond Venezuela.
Nosotros no derrotamos solo a Capriles.
Not only we did defeat Capriles and his coalition, but we also defeated a powerful international coalition that gave everything.
Mucho poder que puso todo.
The global significance of the vote can be found hundreds of miles to the east in the oil-soaked Orinoco Belt. According to studies, Venezuela has overtaken Saudi Arabia to become number one in the world for proven oil reserves, largely thanks to the heavy crude found in its vast alluvial plain. One of the long-term achievements of Chavez is the diversification of his country's trade and economic partnerships. Before him, Venezuela was dependent on the US for over 80% of its oil exports. Now China and India have become the second and third largest markets, with 30% and 15% of the share. Reliance had just signed a contract on September 25th for long-term purchase of 3 to 4 lakh barrels per day. Reliance has also expressed interest in exploration and production in Venezuela. The Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited is already investing in 2 oil fields there. This is good for the Indian strategy of diversification of oil imports and investment in these days of uncertainties caused by the Arab Spring and sanctions on Iran.
Well, let's go across to Shobhan for his perspective. Given the fact that Venezuela has the highest of the crime rates, the highest of the inflation, how does Hugo Chavez get re-elected?
The problem in this country is that we get news about countries like Venezuela from Western sources mostly, and that news is mostly distorted. I mean, if you read New York Times or The Guardian, we get the impression that it's a crime-infested country. Of course, they have problems, but it's not so bad as reflected in the Western media. Since 1999, he came to power. He's completely changed the social fabric of the country. Hugo Chavez runs programs which are called missions. He's invested huge amount of money coming from petroleum wealth into the social capital of the country. So the poor of Venezuela get free education, free housing, very cheap groceries, and free healthcare. Some things which even not European countries and not even US been able to provide to poor in their own country. So I think, and then that's why the poor have voted for him in very large number. So it's the investment in the society which is giving him, huge dividends. Actually.
And a lot of it has to apparently do with China as well, because a lot of oil is being exported to China, and in return, the low-cost, low-cost interest loans that Venezuela receives.
Right.
That is the major source, do you believe, for all these programs?
The Chinese Development Bank, if I'm correct, has given $42 billion to Venezuela, and Venezuela has invested that money in minimum wages and pension funds. So the minimum wages in the country have gone up, and the retired people are getting good pensions so that they can also spend money in the market. And in return, China is getting about 500 million barrels of oil every day. So this China and Venezuela, in a very interesting way, in a very, I would say, intelligent way, have established a symbiotic relationship where China is becoming a partner in Venezuela's social programs.
Right. Yeah. And now, as we heard about from Hugo Chávez's campaign, where he said that he's going to decrease his dependence. He hinted at decreasing his dependence on the US, which has been sort of an effort over the past few years. And export oil to more of the Asian countries. We saw, in our report how the exports to Asia are also increasing, slowly and steadily.
Right.
Can this be seen as a part of a bigger strategy on the part of Venezuela?
Yes, of course it is. Actually, the main issue in this election was oil. I mean, Chávez's rival, Capriles, was talking about changing the way Venezuela does its oil business, which meant the Chinese and the Russian companies, which are already in Venezuela, there will be curbs on them, and he'll do more business with United States or Europe. But what Chávez is saying is that he'll cut down its exports to US, and they're in the process of making a pipeline to the Pacific through Colombia, which means more exports to Asia, particularly to China, and which may mean also the oil prices in Asia may come down. I think it's a good opportunity for India to get involved in this process,
Right. The oil prices coming down wouldn't be too great a news for Venezuela then at this point.
No, because they have so much oil. They have 296 billion barrels of reserves, which makes it the country with the highest reserves in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than 10% more than Saudi Arabia. So they're not actually worried about the prices coming down because they have so much oil, and it's a very small country.
Largest proven oil reserves, according to a latest report.
Yeah.
But what does this mean for India? We had recently a deal signed between Venezuela and leading oil company back home in the country. What does this mean? Which means
the company has signed a deal. They're going to refine oil in Venezuela. Also, they're going to bring oil to India and refine in their refineries in Gujarat. ONGC Videsh is also in the process of investing almost $3 billion in crude oil in Venezuela. Until now, the problem was Indian public sector oil companies didn't have the capacity to refine heavy oil, which is found in Venezuela. They could do sweet crude, which basically comes from Middle East. I think India has a good chance to reduce the dependency on Middle East, which is now passing from one war to another, one crisis to another crisis. So it's a good chance to look at South America as a source of oil, not just Venezuela, also Brazil, which has found huge amount of deposits, can be a good source for India.
Right. After being the president for 14 years, Hugo Chávez has another term. How do you think he's going to change his strategy in this term, keeping in mind several factors as well, which are going on, like his, bad health? A lot of it being talked about back home in Venezuela about, finding a replacement candidate. In these times, what should be his best strategy of going forward with whatever, time perhaps he will be as the president?
I mean, Chávez says he's completely cured of cancer, and we got to believe him. But I think also the president should start building the next leadership in Venezuela. They have some very important, very influential leaders like Oil Minister Ramirez.
Right.
He's quite popular in the country, and he could be a good successor to Hugo Chávez. Also, I think there's one good lesson from this election is that Hugo Chávez is going to pay more attention to the needs of middle-class Venezuelans. Till now, there was a clear divide between the poor Venezuelans and middle-class Venezuelans.
Right.
I think now the emphasis will be on governance and creating new leadership in the country, which I think is very good for Venezuela. Actually.
Absolutely. We leave it at that. Thanks so much, Shobhan, for sharing your perspective with us this week on the show. So there is a task cut out again for this new term for Hugo Chávez. We'll just have to wait and watch how things develop for Asia as well as back home for Venezuela and the huge oil reserves that it has. We take a very short break. After that, Benjamin Netanyahu announces early elections in Israel. Stay tuned for details on that. You're watching World Panorama. US Vice President Joe Biden leaped to the attack against Republican challenger Paul Ryan in a lively debate on Thursday. Biden was seen aggressively defending the administration's economic and foreign policies in a bid to regain momentum in the White House race. Here are the details.
Taking the gloves off, Vice President Joe Biden came swinging at his Republican opponent Paul Ryan as they clashed over everything from Libya and foreign policy to economy and healthcare in their high-stakes debate.
But what we also want to do is make sure that we're not projecting weakness abroad, and that's what's happening here. This Benghazi issue would be a tragedy in and of itself, but unfortunately, it's indicative of a broader problem. And that is what we are watching on our TV screens is the unraveling of the Obama foreign policy, which is making the world more chaotic and us less safe.
We did not know they wanted more security again. And by the way, at the time, we were told we said exactly what the intelligence community told us that they knew. That was the assessment.
Unlike President Barack Obama, who admittedly flubbed the first presidential debate against Republican challenger Mitt Romney by being too polite, Biden took an aggressive stance right from the word go in Thursday night's only vice presidential debate in Kentucky.
The congressman here cut embassy security in his budget by $300 million below what we asked for. Number one, so much for the embassy security piece. Number two, Governor Romney, before he knew the facts, before he even knew that our ambassador was killed, he was out making a political statement which was panned by the media around the world.
Republicans too had reason to be pleased as a younger, smarter Ryan, 42, managed to hold his own even on tough foreign policy issues against the vastly more experienced man, 27 years his senior.
We cannot allow Iran to gain a nuclear weapons capability. Now, let's take a look at where we've come from. When Barack Obama was elected, they had enough fissile material, nuclear material, to make one bomb. Now they have enough for 5. They're racing toward a nuclear weapon.
About 41 states are seen as essentially already decided for Mr. Romney or Mr. Obama, leaving 9 up for grabs, including Ohio. No Republican has ever won the White House without carrying that state. Thursday's clash between Biden and Ryan served as a warm-up act for the final 2 bouts between Obama and Romney in New York State on October 16th and in Florida on October 22nd.
It has been nearly a week since a Syrian mortar shell landed on a Turkish home just across the border, killing 5 members of the same family. The incident brought a swift response from Turkey and a promise by the government in Ankara that it would not hesitate to strike back, which it has done nearly every day since. But a growing role for Turkey in the Syrian conflict may also mean some tricky navigation through political and diplomatic waters. Here's a detailed report.
A Syrian passenger plane took off from the Turkish capital of Ankara on Thursday after being grounded for several hours by Turkish authorities on suspicion that it was carrying military equipment destined for Syria. The Turkish authorities seized some of the cargo from the plane but gave no details of what they had found on board.
At this time, I would urge again those countries who are providing arms to both sides should stop flowing this military equipment, and also further militarization will put the Syrian people only more miserable situations. This is not an option. The only option available is the political resolution through political dialogue.
The Syrian shelling of the border town of Akakle in Sanliurfa province in southeastern Turkey last Wednesday, in which 5 civilians were killed, marked an escalation of tension along the border. But Turkey has made it clear that it is reluctant to launch any major military operation on Syrian soil, but will protect Turkish nationals.
We don't want to act in a warfare situation. But the thing is, in Akçakale and in the following days, the shelling from the Syrian side is continuing, and I think no government can stay idle in such a position, because we must protect the lives of our civilians.
Talking about the future of Turkish-Syrian relations, Selçuk Ünal reiterated his country's stand on the Syria issue and also appealed to the international community to act and solve the Syria crisis.
Our expectation from the Syrian administration is to stop fighting with its own people, to start a political process that could lead a transition, and to stop threatening its own people, as well as creating new crises for other neighbors, including Turkey.
Turkey is continuing to increase its military presence and defense along its 900-kilometer border with Syria as conflict between the two neighbors continues to intensify. The Syrian border town of Mazrat came under sustained mortar fire on Wednesday as President Bashar al-Assad's forces battled rebels who control swaths of territory near Turkey.
Over to Israel now, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is widely expected to win re-election with a campaign focused on national security, a vote shaping up as the first in decades in which Israelis won't have a viable challenger with a competing vision on foreign policy and defense. However, the early election has the potential to spur a makeover of Netanyahu's coalition, shifting Israel's government from a narrow alliance of conservative and religious parties to a broader-based grouping of right, centrist and left-leaning parties. Elections within 3 months was the headline of Israel's daily Maariv, printed just hours after Netanyahu's announcement. The front pages of Israel's main daily newspapers ran pictures of Netanyahu, who addressed Israelis on 9th of October in a televised statement to announce early elections.
I cannot be a partner to a move that I think compromises the security of Israel, tears the people apart, and enshrines the principle of withdrawal to the indefensible 67 lines, and I think in the future will also risk the unity of Jerusalem.
Friction between Netanyahu and Defense Minister Ehud Barak over relations with the US fueled talks last week of a possible early Israeli election. Ministers said the quarrel, Barak's resistance to defense cuts in coalition budget talks, and his dovish comments on peace efforts with the Palestinians were signs of a fraying alliance with Netanyahu and a national ballot as early as February. Opinion polls suggest Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party will be the front-runner in the national vote that's likely to be held early 2013, some 8 months ahead of schedule.
The way the field seems right now, Netanyahu is unrivaled, certainly not from the left. At the center, at the same time, he benefits from the complete collapse of the current major opposition party, Kadima.
Asael sees these two issues, security and economy, as the leading themes for the upcoming elections agenda.
Had the elections taken place today, the main issues would have been the economy and the Middle East. On the Middle Eastern front, right now, Netanyahu's record and his standing are positive as far as the public is concerned, because he has maintained quiet, and because under his leadership, Israel right now looms tall as an island of stability in an otherwise volatile Middle East.
The balloting could be held as early as January, but many speculate it would be set for mid-February, which would make Netanyahu's the first Israeli government in more than 2 decades to complete a 4-year term. Time for a very short break. On the other side, the European Union wins the Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts to promote peace and democracy in Europe. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch. A recent document produced by the United States government shows that the US has never recognized Japan's claim of sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands. The report, Diaoyu Islands Dispute, US Treaty Obligations, released on 25th of September by the US Congressional Research Service, clarifies the US government's stand on the sovereignty issue. The Nobel Peace Prize on Friday was awarded to the European Union, an institution racked by the Eurozone crisis. The award served as a reminder that the EU had largely brought peace to a continent that tore itself apart in 2 world wars in which tens of millions died. The award, consisting of a gold medal, a Nobel diploma and 8 million Swedish Norra, will be handed over at a ceremony in Oslo on 10th of December. A long-standing legal battle between the Pakistani government and the country's assertive Supreme Court appears to have run its course after both sides came closer to a face-saving settlement. A 5-member Supreme Court bench led by Justice Asif Saeed Khosa on Wednesday approved the draft of a letter to be written to the authorities in Switzerland that could theoretically revive corruption cases against President Asif Ali Zardari dating from the 1990s. Russian President Vladimir Putin lobbied Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki on Wednesday to support Russian energy investment. Putin, a vocal opponent of the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, called for Russia to strengthen its presence in the OPEC oil producer state at talks with Maliki at his residence near Moscow. Russia signed a $4.2 billion worth of arms deals with Iraq on 9th of October. And if you've missed the week's biggest sporting events, here's your chance to catch up. We get you sports action.
World Anti-Doping Agency has again thrown its support behind US Anti-Doping Agency and released a lengthy report with evidence to prove cyclist Lance Armstrong used performance-enhancing drugs. USADA issued the report on Thursday explaining its reasons for stripping Armstrong of his 7 Tour de France titles and banning him for life from Olympic sports. The report, which included witness testimony from 11 former teammates, accused Armstrong of cheating through the use of EPO, blood doping and other drugs and pushing his teammates to do the same. Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man, will reveal next week which events he will target at the Rio Olympics in 2016. Bolt, who won 3 golds at London 2012, said that he will speak to his coach in the coming days as he decides whether to stick to the 100 and 200 meter or take on the 400 and long jump instead. Bolt was attending an event at the Nissan headquarters for a special unveiling of a one-of-a-kind gold-colored GTR, which with Bolt's signature on the hood will be auctioned off for the Usain Bolt Foundation. Justin Rose beat 14 times major champion Tiger Woods in the semi-finals on Thursday to set up a title showdown with fellow Englishman Lee Westwood at the World Golf Final exhibition event. Rose carded 2 birdies and an eagle in the last 6 holes to defeat world number 2 Woods, who eliminated top-ranked Rory McIlroy earlier in the day by 1 shot. Westwood blitzed his way past Carl Schwarzenegger by 6 strokes, the world number 4 firing 2 eagles and 8 birdies in a course record 10 under 61.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
R&B star Rihanna and rapper Nicki Minaj led nominations for the American Music Awards, with 4 apiece on Tuesday, edging out stiff competition from pop sensations Justin Bieber and One Direction. Rihanna was nominated in the top category Artist of the Year, where she will compete with Bieber, Katy Perry and Maroon 5. Minaj scored 2 nods for her album Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded. One Direction have made chart history in America for the second time in 2012, after scoring the fastest-selling track by a non-US artist ever. Live While We're Young topped the digital tracks and song charts after selling 341,000 copies. This year they became the first British group to top the Billboard chart with their debut album. Last week the boy band picked up 3 prizes at the Radio 1 Teen Awards in London. Adele has been honored by the US music industry for the success of her hit song Rolling in the Deep. The track, co-written by producer Paul Epworth, was named Song of the Year at the event in London hosted by licensing body Broadcast Music Inc. The song was the most played on US TV and radio in 2011. It spent 7 weeks at the top of the US Billboard Hot 100. Adele was also awarded 2 other prizes for her hit Someone Like You and Set Fire to the Rain for being among the most played pop songs last year. United States pop star Lady Gaga received the Lennon Ono Grant for Peace Award from Yoko Ono at a ceremony in the Icelandic capital on Tuesday. Peace activist Yoko rewarded Lady Gaga for combining her stardom with activism and changing the mental map of the world. Lady Gaga accepted the award in person along with a charitable donation that she would in turn give to the Elton John AIDS Foundation. Pussy Riot member Yekaterina Samotsevich walked out of a Moscow courthouse on Wednesday, a free woman, after judges decided to suspend her 2-year sentence for hooliganism. The singer was surrounded by a mob of journalists and supporters as she departed. As for the 2 other jail members, more appeals are in the works.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. This week, we wrap up in Paris, where the yearly event Nuit Blanche White Night started on Saturday. Launched 10 years ago, the White Night is a contemporary art festival, and this year it was dedicated to River Seine. Goodbye and thanks for watching.